So I'm using slides today. Primum non nocere, okay? First, do no harm. We associate that with medicine. And we're supposed to do this oath devised by Hippocrates that says, first, do no harm. What they're hoping is we won't kill the patients because we're learning medicine, okay? But what I started learning as I was practicing medicine was there are so many contexts in which we must first do no harm. Okay. When we look at children and they're having a tantrum or they're upset, we immediately feel like, oh, poor baby. I grew up on the East Coast, so there's a lot of Spanish, a lot of Puerto Rican, so it was always porito, ito, bendito. Very easy to be vulnerable with children. When they're hurting, we have no problem trying to soothe them. Their tears are so big. Their ache is so big. And we have no problem saying to them, it's okay. You'll be okay. The problem becomes when that child is your height or more. We no longer see their heartache. We see their obnoxiousness. But what we don't see is how they speak to themselves. First, do no harm. First, do no harm. And what I found is that the teens that I interact with, because I was trained to practice medicine, and I was trained to not hurt them with medicine, but they did not teach us not to hurt them with our words. So when we weighed a patient and we said, you know, your weight's up. And when we asked a patient to do a certain regimen and they didn't do it so they weren't better, and we scolded, we still didn't remember that quote, first do no harm. And so what we did was we reinforced how self-critical people are of themselves. The problem with being self-critical is it becomes incredibly difficult to meet one's goals. It becomes so difficult that I have encountered so many teens who have trouble even getting out of bed. They're unable to get to school, unable to do homework, unable to focus, unable to have an idea of what it is they might want to do on this earth. First, do no harm. What I realized is it takes so much courage to ask, why is it that I am so self-critical? It takes a lot of courage to actually look at yourself and say, why can't I treat myself like the 5-year-old child that's hurting inside me? And so what I've found that I can amend how I practice medicine by looking at the teen in front of me that is sometimes taller than I am. And instead of looking at them as this really functioning human being, what I do is I look at the 4-year-old in them and I teach them how to have self-compassion. And so what I say is first do no harm. And that includes you to yourself, because we know that when we are emotionally hurting, we absolutely hurt others. And so the question to ask is to have the courage to say, if I am hurting and I hurt others, then I need the courage to be curious enough to know why I am hurting. And if I can teach that before they leave the room, what I do is I find that I can put them in a different state of being. It turns out that that self-critical talk does a number on some very important chemistries in our brain. And what it does is it increases our amount of cortisol. Cortisol, which can cause a lot of inflammation throughout the body. So it's no surprise when I have a teen who comes to me and has something like, I have abdominal pain, I'm achy all over, I have a headache all the time, I don't function well, I just don't move well. It's no surprise, because we know that those negative thoughts do a number on how the body works. We also know that this is a complete decline that can lead to very bad toxic outcomes, whether it be cancer, Crohn's disease, all these other diseases. These are our thoughts, not the medicine. First, do no harm. What we do is when we walk out of our homes in the morning, we come out with our armor, right? For some people, the armor looks like makeup. For some people, the armor is their nice clothes. For others, the armor may look like their bodybuilding. I had a patient who wouldn't stop talking about how much he had bodybuilded and how great he looked. And so, of course, I knew that that was his armor, right? And so what I do is I understand and I remember, first, do no harm. And instead of complimenting on what they want me to look at, what I do is I show the courage to say, and why is this important to you? I become curious in an effort to model for them in that short time period that I'm with them, how to be curious about why I'm feeling that way, which requires incredible amounts of vulnerability. That's why we have the armor, right? So because of that, I get past the armor and then I can talk to them more. It turns out that that self-compassion is an incredible exhibitor of a hormone called oxytocin. And I don't know if anybody remembers what oxytocin does. That's some amazing stuff. You talk about a powerful love drug. Turns out oxytocin is what ejects the milk when the baby's feeding on the breast. It's what helps in terms of an orgasm. It's what also gets the baby out when a mother is giving birth. And it turns out that it's what gives us this feeling of well-being when we are in contact or even speaking kindly to ourselves, which means you have the ability to carry this with you all the time. So when I have a teen who comes to me and says, as has happened frequently of late, because laws have been passed, hey doc, any chance I can get that weed medical card? I say, I have a better drug for you, right? And so I teach them some of these tools. What I know is that when I see an anxious teen, when I see a teen that has very rigid roles and doesn't like to break out of things, I know that they're struggling between the difference between self-esteem and the difference between self-esteem and self-worth. Self-esteem is definitely when everything that determines my worth is outside of me. That is everything like grades, my clothes, the car I'm driving, the house I live in. Self-worth is something that no one can take away from you. This is yours. And you can reinforce it with the self-compassion, which increases your levels of oxytocin. We often wait. Why are things difficult? Things are difficult because without those things, we would not understand how limited our time is on this earth. And that limited time is there to align us with who we are, to show us you don't have all day. The sooner you start practicing this, the sooner you'll get it right. And that's why every deathbed scene in every movie makes us so sad, because we are well aware that we have such little time. We have our thoughts and our emotions, and this affects our behavior. And for teens, the top 3 causes of death are accidental death, suicide, and homicide. We know we have an impact on this. We know we can change this by helping them understand their worth. And they will never understand their worth when they do not have enough self-compassion to look at their wounds, to look at their pain, their emotional pain, with loving kindness instead of harsh criticism. Self-compassion has been a way that I have been able to practice medicine, and in doing so, have my mission statement reinforced daily, which is that anybody I come in contact with should always leave my presence, hopefully feeling better and having learned more than before they entered my presence. That becomes my mission statement when I'm interacting with someone. And so when I practice self-compassion, I increase the chances that that is likely. There are tools that we can use to reinforce these. I know some people find them very difficult, but it is a daily practice. And I tell them that all the time because I want them to understand you will not get it right at first. It will be hard to remember, but actually practicing methods, temporary tattoos, things that will remind you constantly that these are the ways in which we can have you keep in that place of self-compassion. Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. Miguel Ruiz wrote a book called The Four Agreements. The first agreement is to be impeccable with your words. And I know that the way that teens speak to themselves, the way parents speak to themselves, they would never speak to a 4-year-old. As a matter of fact, that is often the way that I can get teens to figure out what they're saying, is I say, would you say that to a 4-year-old? Would you say that to your 4-year-old self? And they go, absolutely not. And so I say, and why is it that you deserve that? If they don't have a way to trigger this kind of memory, it will not stick. You are worthy, to quote Oprah Winfrey, because you were born. Not because of your grades, not because of where you're going to school, not because of where you come from, or where you think you're going and what you think you're going to become. The bad things that happen to you are there to remind you of that. Because never have I heard somebody say to me that I am not better because of what I have been through. The point is to overcome the fear so that you can get through it. And it is almost impossible to do this without self-compassion. First, do no harm. Thank you.